All right, Bill, you know those podcast episodes where you get off and you're just like, man, we could have gone on and on and on. Not in a bad way, but just so much information we could have probably covered in that with Cassie. But that was dynamite, man.
Anytime I'm talking to an operator and they're willing to give me their time, a good operator, I could talk to them all day. I mean, there's so many questions that I have, that you have, that our listeners have. I mean, just a lot of good stuff in this podcast, and certainly gives us a lot of things to think about going forward, because there's a lot of topics that can cover that can really help people when it comes to operations.
Yeah, and I think operations tend to, not get glazed over, but the operators in your business are the people that get stuff done, and then they're the people that actually move the needle. Not that ideas and stuff isn't important, but getting stuff done is what actually matters. Cassie dives deep into that, how to get stuff done, how to put stuff in place. So you guys are going to really enjoy this episode with Cassie Tallon with the Fractional Match. Enjoy.
Welcome to Dental Momentum, the podcast dedicated to lively discussions on business and financial strategies tailored for dental business owners. At Duckett Ladd, we're committed to transforming your business journey and supporting you at every stage. Join us as we delve into the keys to long-term practice success, from cutting-edge accounting and strategic tax planning to personalized business strategies. Together, let's propel your dental practice forward with unstoppable momentum.
So Cassie, let's kind of transition to a little tactical here, right? You work with groups in a fractional COO basis. Walk us through kind of the day in the life. Like, what's that COO? What are they responsible for? What are they doing?
Yeah, so I get hired in a variety of capacities. Some people think, oh, she's just hired to come in and support operations. And many times I come in with a doctor that already has a very strong goal in mind. So they're either looking to streamline and they know that they have an issue, they just don't know the origin of it. And so they'll pull me in and say, hey, we have 20 tech stacks that we've looked at. Can you come in and vet what's going on and really help us fix it? So I'm hired at the point of kind of the 911 call. And then also I'm hired both by private equity as well as the groups or singular doctor to start to look at scaling and what does this look like over the next year or several years for us to be ready to make the acquisition. And so what that looks like in a general day is it's a lot of talking to teams. It's boots on the ground. I'm flying and going into clinics. I usually do kind of an undercover scrubs is what I call it. Sit there, observe in scrubs, watch what's going on for several days, and then begin to formulate my game plan. After this many years of doing it, sometimes that looks like one day in a clinic, and then I can usually, give a pretty good analysis of what's going on.
So when you go and you evaluate and you observe, what are some of the common things you see that are broken as they're trying to grow and expand?
Yeah, over the last 12 months, I have been shocked by the level of embezzlement. It's at an all-time high, and it's happening in multiple facet ways. I've also been shocked by the fact that the increase in technology has actually opened the door for more of it, which is ironic because we would think, oh, good, technology's in place, there's no more embezzlement occurring, and it's actually been the opposite because there's some major fragmentation of things. The other thing I see operationally is I see a deep disconnect between what the doctor wants chairside in terms of treatment acceptance, patient acceptance of, the next steps and finances, and what the actuals are with insurance, and then all the way through RCM. So those are the two trending spaces, is the RCM treatment acceptance, reimbursements, and the embezzlement piece. And truly over the last year, I've been shocked by what I didn't want to assume was embezzlement, but certainly was. And it's been at the forefront of a lot of the things I've been building to help doctors.
Interesting. You said something there at the very beginning. You remember that show? Was it Undercover Boss? I picture this, Cassie, like you're going into the clinic for the first day. You're an undercover hygienist. Like, who's the new girl? That's Cassie. And then you have an exit meeting. They're like, she looks familiar. Who is that?
Yeah, actually, I had one private equity ask to change my name. So I went in scrubs and they introduced me as just a consultant. And I ended up finding out a lot of the things that would have not otherwise been found. because the team felt the ability to vent to me was there. So
Maybe
anyway,
that's a way to uncover embezzlement, right?
it
Somebody starts
is.
talking
Yeah.
to you like, Cassie,
Yeah, it
I'm doing
is.
this over here. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you want in on
perpetrator.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
unfortunately, with the embezzlement piece, I can spot it pretty quick. So I've got a little bit of a knack for it, and it's been good in terms of being able to help doctors see just how quickly that can happen.
so on that specific piece, embezzlement, right? I want to hone in there just a second and go off script a tad. But why is embezzlement? Why are you seeing it more? Is it happening more? Is Are doctors just on the lookout for it more? Like, what is causing the uptick that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think the staff that we've hired is in that household income level that they're struggling right now, and I think that to define embezzlement as a certain type of criminal personality is really a disservice to everybody in our industry. It
Hmm.
is the person that's overworked, that's been there nights on end, that hasn't had a raise, that thinks I this is owed to me, and yeah, so determining what that looks like inside your clinic, I think it's on the rise. And I think it's on the rise because the doctors are entrusting more to the teams
Hmm.
and taking less of a leadership role, just out of the fact that they're facing burnout. And so for me, I see that, day to day as this, open door that needs to be closed and locked
Mhm.
tight. And the doctors aren't aware that, it could possibly even be happening even with employees that have been there 20, 25 years.
So when you do see that, do you tend to see it on like copays, or where do you tend to see it? And based upon that answer, what do you tend to recommend doctors to do about it?
Yeah, so two of the areas that I'm looking at right away when I'm going into the clinic are the refund policy and what's going back to the patient, how refunds are being processed. I'm always going to be old school in my refund approach. I believe it should be a check. You're billed a secondary merchant fee when you return that money back to a credit card, and unfortunately, people are returning money back to credit cards that are not the patient's card. So
Mhm.
that is on the rise. And then the cash policy. Cash is king. I don't think we'll ever see it go away in dental offices because, people save money for their dentures and things of that nature. And it is a good way for them to pay. They get a cash discount. And what I see with that cash policy is really direct handling of the cash all the way around needs to be evaluated. And also making sure that the team understands how that money is checked throughout the day and at
Yeah.
the end of the day and sent to the bank. I see offices all of the time where deposits are gathered and taken by the same person that posts them. The cash is taken by the same person that takes it to the bank. And in any other industry, we wouldn't do that. I mean, even when you work in a fast food restaurant, the person that's the cashier is not the one going to the bank and writing the deposit slip. We've missed some steps that protect the clinic for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just people putting too much trust,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
it's easy to do.
yeah.
So talk a little bit about, so you work with these groups that want to grow, that want to scale, right? So talk about kind of as the COO there, you've got, you want to add offices, add ops, but how do you kind of balance the demands of wanting to scale, but also like making sure you're still having a good patient experience, right? And providing good clinical dentistry. How do you really balance the two from that doctor's perspective?
Yeah, sometimes there are a lot of unspokens that the doctor wants to be accomplished in the patient experience and in the practice that are not, solidified in a formal process. And so there's some pausing and teaching and training the team to actually know how to deliver and meet the expectations of the doctor. Oftentimes I hear a doctor say, "But I want it this way," and I'll say, "Okay, but who did you tell? Who did you communicate that to?" And they'll go, "Well, my assistant of 20 years." And I said, "Well, did you know that she doesn't really converse with the rest of the team? Like she kind of just, runs on her own." And he'll be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And so I think there's a lot of an assumption in dentistry with doctors that they assume what they've communicated once is shared throughout. And so I believe in building structured training models. I believe in building internal checklists so that every time a patient is taken back, I know the exact CDT codes associated with that intake type of visit because that's what the doctor does. And ironically, I think that we use these codes in dental that equate with us getting paid, and we assume, okay, it's just get the code to the ledger so I get compensated. And I try to get the doctor to pause a bit and say, no, this is about a checklist. Those CDT codes serve as the physical checklist of what took place in the visit. So I really am going in and building, a structure that, just like in building a home, before the foundation is poured, the steel is laid, right? So that the foundation holds and doesn't crack. That's what we're doing is we're saying, let's build that foundation right so that now as you scale, everything else holds true. And so, I think patient experience doesn't diminish when our mind and our energy isn't caught up in something else. And so I use the example of sitting in an office and a lady was on the call with a new patient and she was audibly speaking to the person next to her saying, now what code should I put in for the comp exam? Okay, Mrs. Smith, hold on 1 minute. Okay, and then is she going to get fluoride at that visit? And I was like, okay, so we don't want to have any of those conversations to where the patient hears it because it doesn't sound like you're qualified. And so that's really true. It's happening every day in offices. So the more guesswork we take out, the more present we are to serve patients.
You were talking a minute ago about, kind of a lack of potential communication, and that was a specific example. But we were talking the other day, Cassie, and you had kind of, I think you had actually written an article about how a lot of times there's a disconnect between like leadership and boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think that was in specific to the context of a C-suite, maybe a bigger operation. But do you see that all throughout operations where leadership, their vision, kind of what they're trying to do is just not communicated well?
Yeah, I think, I was really kind of groomed in dental in the servant leadership model, and it's proven very well for my career. And what I have found is when I go into clinics, even, at a leadership level at a single practice versus a group leader, director of operations, there are a lot of KPIs and reports and demands on the aging balances. We're pushing for these numbers and send this in. And my job is to go in and help them pause and go backwards for a bit and say, if the team doesn't understand the why of those KPIs, if they're not invested in those numbers in some capacity, whether that be a bonus structure, whether that be, quarterly reviews as a team, something that's tracking with what you're asking of them, there's a massive disconnect that will never get you to your future potential. And I have doctors all the time that'll say, my reports look the same every week. We're not growing. We're staying stagnant. And I don't know why. And I will go back and say, well, have you spoken to the team about some of the things they're seeing or that are trending so that you have an idea of where to go from there? And, I've seen it even down to the point of where a doctor said, I feel like our confirmations are just completely diminished. They're not happening anymore. And those appointments aren't being fulfilled. And then going back into the system and realizing that they switched over to a new server and the PMS is not connected to the patient communication. So indeed, yes, no text, calls, or communication have been going out, doc. And so sometimes I see that where, they think and make assumptions of the decline, or they just keep doing the tyranny of the urgent, as well as those KPI reports, and they're not investigating the origin of why why things aren't working.
So let's tangent just a bit. So we're going to talk about finance, right? So Bill says this all the time, especially in the fractional CFO meetings, right? Is that director of ops needs to come first. Like that's probably one of our main questions when we're interviewing, I guess, prospective clients for that CFO service. How's your director of ops? Who is it? Do you have one in place? That sort of thing. And Bill, I think what you're really asking is, are you going to be able? Who do you have in place to get stuff done? Let's use not bad words here. Stuff done. How are you going to get stuff done? Right. Cassie, can you kind of maybe affirm us, or just how do you see that interplay between finance and ops? Like, why is it so crucial in a group practice?
Yeah, I think that that foundational aspect of how everything runs is the director of ops. Unfortunately, what I see right now is a lot of director of ops that are hired that don't have that understanding of the synergy between the financial aspects with a CFO and the operational side. They're really more of kind of like a military checklist driven person. And I would challenge that when you're hiring for a COO, consider starting fractional before you move into that full-time role, because a lot of times systems need to be broken and rebuilt and the team needs to be rallied before you bring in someone that is disconnected from them. Many times I see where it's like the director of ops versus the rest of the team, and it'll never work. So yes, I agree it needs to exist, but really only under the posture of something that actually serves the teams, and someone that is, serving the practice in a way that they're constantly curious about why things are running the way that they are, and leaning into those financial experts to say, okay, I'm seeing this trend. Let's talk about it. What do you think is a potential root cause, and how can we work together to make a more lean and efficient practice? So, many times I say that if you want to hire someone good in operations, ask them if they have the Dave Ramsey mindset, or if they're, challenged to, in the capacity of understanding that they need to be a strong saver, but also influencer at the same time. Because many operators come in and they want to be big spenders with big ideas, and that's usually not the best path forward.
You said, excuse me, you said something there that I thought was really interesting, and that's the KPIs, because we are big on KPIs. We're finance guys, and we tend to fall back on that. And you've kind of opened my eyes that sometimes we maybe do that kind of robotically. We kind of look at things somewhat black and white. Help us understand, as finance, or as somebody, maybe a practice owner who understands their finances well, the nuance of not just what a KPI says, but why it's important, why that needs to be communicated. Unpack that a little bit further, Cassie, because that's a really interesting comment that I don't know that I've really stopped and considered.
Yeah, I would, just to give it as an example, PPV is a big one for me, and the actual value that's happening while the patient is in the chair. And if you were to ask a doctor,
Unpack there for the listeners, Cassie. PPV.
Production per visit.
There you go.
And so, sorry, so
You speak it all day. It becomes commonplace, right?
I do. Well, when I'm speaking to you all, I forget I need to package it for the audience. But yes, I think that that as an example is a great opportunity to go and sit with the doctor and the team, and even leadership, to say, okay, what do you estimate your PPV is for a new patient? And they'll be like, well, a comp exam is this, and so they'll give you this, 239 or whatever it is, right? Okay, well, that's great. So what would you say it is for a limited exam? Well, a limited exam is $69. And then I'll go, okay, but we're not talking about the potential PPV. You're talking about just the origination of the visit. So let's talk a little bit further about what you want to see happen in a comp exam, or what you want to see happen in a limited exam. And I'll have the doctor go, well, my goal is, when they come in for the limited exam, is to also talk to them about malocclusion, and say, maybe some of that wear pattern, or why that crown keeps breaking, is because you need clear aligners. And I said, okay, so is that woven into your limited exam conversation when malocclusion is there? Well, no, but my hope is that we'll get to that. And I'm like, no, let's pause right there. So does everybody on the team know you're passionate about malocclusion and wear pattern and a crown breaking in a patient's mouth? Well, yeah, I think so. So then we sit as a team, and nobody really knows that the doctor wants that to be a potential outcome of what is just an emergency visit. And so we build into the conversation, into the AI components, into the notation components and prompts, into the CDT codes, what that doctor wants, instead of making the assumption that the PPV is just the one point of origin CDT code. And it's like everybody on the team becomes excited, because now we're out of the mundane of just the visit scheduled, visit completed. And we're talking about something bigger, about what the doctor is passionate about, what he would like to see as the outcome for the patient. And then we build from there. So if we have someone coming in for a limited and we know that it's a broken crown with a history, we're already ready to give them financing options. In fact, we've even messaged them about it so that they know they can use their care credit card that they also use for vet. They can apply for iCreditWorks or whatever that, solution is. And it's setting the stage differently. So for me, when the team understands PPV isn't just the code for the visit that they scheduled and they're coming in for, but it's truly about the potential of what the value of the visit could be if we're achieving the goals of what the doctor wants.
You said something earlier, Cassie, in regard to, I'll say CFO, COO here. Like the CFO, they're talking to the COO and like, hey, this is the trends I'm seeing. What do you think's causing this? So the interplay between ops and finance there, how much do you think like the finance side needs to know about like operations and then vice versa? How much does that ops person need to know about the finance side? I mean, that's a big question, but.
Yeah, just like I mentioned the pulse check, I believe the practice health check deserves a weekly look, even if it's 30 minutes between the finance side and operations. And it's just to say, we're noticing this, or a large purchase just came in for a new CERAC unit. Talk to me about what your goals are for scheduling more crowns in the clinic. I think there has to be an adequate conversation piece happening all the time, because as the doctor is making purchases or the team are making purchases and you're seeing this, increased amount of expenditure occurring, the operations manager or director really is going to serve as the liaison and the guide for the true ROI and potential of whatever's being spent. So if you're seeing an increase in surgical guide purchases, or let's just say 1 week you see an increase in lab case remakes. Wow, I noticed your lab cost went up significantly. Tell me more about that. That operations director likely knows nothing about it, right? Because they're maybe in the weeds of something else at the moment. But upon investigation, what I find is when I'm talking to, the CFO is, okay, this is something I need to go back and take a hard look at. And I will find things like there's no notation listed for lab cases, or they didn't have enough shade guides. So the shade determination was off and they made a guess based on historicals instead of actually having what they needed chairside. And I mean this in all sincerity here. I think sometimes we overthink the expenditures when it's a lack of just one thing that could be changed or shifted, like clinical notation, so that we're not remaking the labs. And, we tend to overthink those numbers or point fingers and say it's the lab when there may be an origination in something that's happening right within the clinic.
Well, you mentioned, I'm jumping, Bill, on the weekly health check between the ops and finance. How often do you think that's happening? Like in group practices, how often are they actually doing that? Because it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
It's accountability, communication.
I think that DSOs and groups are more inclined to do that. And I think they are doing more check-ins and more frequent, like week huddles, so to speak, where they're coming together. I think it's an ideal scenario that doesn't happen all the time, but I also am in the belief that meetings don't need to be an hour. They need to be 15 or 30 minutes with a very strong structural checklist. And I think to dedicate 15 minutes a week feels far less painful than dedicating an hour. And so in an ideal environment, yes, it should be occurring. Does it happen? No, I think that we overthink even that and try to set aside an hour and, have these complex conversations. It's not really what we need to do. It needs to be a 15-minute check-in of the heartbeat of the practice. How's it running? That really gives us, eyes and ears into what's going on. And honestly, once you have those conversations, it's amazing to me how you go back into the clinic and have a conversation with someone and have this aha moment Like they weren't able to order the larger bags for the cassettes. So they ended up taking everything out of the big bag and putting them into singular bags, increasing their sterilization bag cost by like triple. And then we come back and go, okay, wait a second. So yes, you took a different route, but the cassette is the best and most efficient for time and expenditures. So let's go source another bag and order it instead of just taking a reroute. In dental, I always say it's almost like the mouse that's in the cage with the cheese. And you know how, if you've ever seen like a lab study, they'll just move the points of the path to a nut so the mouse will go a different way to find the cheese. We do that in dental. Like a barrier is there, and instead of trying to figure out how to overcome the barrier, we're like, oh, new route. And by the time it's done, we've created 20 new routes that are costing our practice significantly instead of removing the one barrier to get to the cheese faster, the money faster.
Yeah, see, and I think that's the superpower of an ops, is to figure out what that one barrier is. And Jared, you and I can say we've been in plenty of relationships where we feel like the finance side's in good shape, but ops is not where it needs to be. And what we tend to see there, Cassie, is a lot of the same conversations over and over because nothing's ever getting done. So I'll flip that conversation to you and say, have you ever been a part of a group or worked with a group that had great operations, including yourself, but the finance and the data wasn't there? And what does that look like, when you're in that kind of situation? Good ops, no finance, or bad finance?
Yeah, I mean, I just had this happen recently, where they had someone in finance that didn't have any history in dental. They were just operating out of QuickBooks, and all they were doing was just balancing the bank statement with QuickBooks. That was it.
Yeah.
Just balance the bank against QuickBooks.
That's step one. That's step one.
But that was it. That's step
Right.
one. And I was going, okay, but like, have you ever run any reports inside of the PMS? Because a few things that you need to know, first of all, are what's actually happening with the money on a day-to-day basis and the actual deposits. Have you balanced the deposit sheet inside of the PMS with the bank statement? And they're like, well, no, I didn't know I need to do that. Well, okay, but that's where the embezzlement happens, is we're only balancing what's happening in the bank and we're not looking at the day sheet in the actual PMS. And again, that's still part of just step one. Talking about the full P&L and the expenditures and making sure that there's itemization in the correct way, and that if something's purchased, everybody on board knows what the ROI and the use of that large purchase is. And so, that was a great example for me just recently, and it was, for 7 clinics with someone who had generally no idea of the facets of the practice, or how a practice runs, that I left going, the disconnect is so deep. They're never going to move the needle and get to where they want to be with growth potential until they have someone who's knowledgeable on the finance side to push and to challenge them in these areas.
So on ops and finance, as these groups scale, right, they get bigger, and maybe this goes back to the foundation and laying the steel that you referenced, but like, how do you recommend these groups build out like the processes and procedures, like document specific things that need to be in place for both of these to play well together?
Yeah, I think right now I am noticing that the SOPs of the past need to be blown up.
Just set them on fire, huh?
Yeah, these consultants are coming in, and I honestly feel like they're stealing from the doctor. They're coming in and they're giving them, a book of SOPs and saying, okay, now when this happens, go have your team go to the binder and turn to page 74. And I'm like, okay, none of that is real life. None of that is part of what's happening in our day to day. And so I'm very big on quick punch lists of, daily tasks. I'm big on team huddles and structured and accountability that follows. Giving the team actual accountability points to speak in huddle about where things stand is huge. I mean, if I have to be the one that stands up on Monday morning and say why our aging report is so out of hand, you better believe that I'm working hard to not have to get up there and say why it's bad, but I get to give a good positive report instead. And so I think that we become too structured in SOPs and these formulas for success when there is a greater origin in the efficiencies of the team, right down to restructuring the team for best accountability and approach. I think gone are the days of hiring a patient coordinator, and here are the days of hiring a patient care coordinator that comes in and actually is providing care in a multiple facet space of not just taking a patient's money at the checkout desk, but also being able to handle something chairside as well. And so there's really a restructuring that's happening. And so in order to scale, it's necessary to make sure that the right people are in the right seats, that they have the right daily task lists that are accountable. I have a program I set up for docs where they actually can go in with the team and the team checks off their daily tasks and a copy of it gets sent to the doctor each day. So they just log in, check off what they've done for the day. Yes, I fixed that. Yes, I did that. And if they couldn't, there's a space where they can leave a reason why they weren't able to get to it. And then at the end of each week, the doctor reviews those and sets up a 10-minute time with the team member to just say, where were our failure points? And if the doc can't do it, the operations leader does it. But again, making a practice more efficient means the right people, minimized task lists that are clear and effective, and really making sure everybody's moving towards the same goal. Many times I see where the practice has been fragmented from the front office to the back office, and they're not in alignment of where they're supposed to be moving.
Yeah, Cassie, I think that's one of your gifts as we've gotten to know you, is your ability to kind of break complex issues down into simple SOPs almost, but ones that have that really nice touch point. I know you have a book coming out. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us what readers can potentially expect there and when they might be able to get their hands on it.
Yeah, so the book itself is not dental specific, but I have a series of workbooks that join with it that are. And the book was really just a labor of love in working with doctors and teams that mostly post-acquisition or post-scaling, where they brought in more doctors and grew, lost purpose and needed to kind of rechart their own path in life. And I am a strong proponent that when team members know what their purpose in life is, when they know what their heart's desire is, maybe they forgot why they got into dental. That's what this book is about. It's about helping people kind of rechart their course and find, a better path forward. And that doesn't necessarily mean leaving your profession. That for me means being confident and secure in your profession because you remembered why you started it in the first place. So it really is a guided book. You write in the book, you take it with you to really kind of jumpstart some dreams maybe you've had all along. I've had the ability to beta my book with quite a few who now are actually building those dreams. I have a good friend that's building their clinics right now in New York. Exactly the way they want them to be because they were challenged to dream bigger than just the mundane. And so I'm excited. I think dentistry is evolving, and the book is, in my mind, a supportive measure to say it's not too late to go after what you're passionate about. If you have dreamed about just having a clinic for sleep because you're passionate about the outcomes of those that use dental sleep appliances, now is the time to pursue it. So it's exciting, and I really look forward to motivating and inspiring people to just get back out there and do what they love.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I mean, I'm not even going to ask how you found time on your calendar to squeeze in writing a book. I'm sure there's time there somewhere. But last question, and maybe this is a big, I don't know, I'm just wondering in my head here. But like, Director of Ops, COO, big job, right? Big job, extremely important job in a dental group. With the constant change in technology, we haven't mentioned AI, but I'll say it here, AI, how everything evolves so quickly. Has that made the Director of Ops, that COO jobs, easier or harder in regard to what they put in place from a tech stack, processes, all that stuff, with all AI and tech evolving so quickly?
Yeah, I would say it's made it harder. right out of the gate because at least my experience with dentists is they love the shiny new thing. And why not, right? Like we love tech. And I've worked with dentists that, that would come back with a new scanner and I would say, okay, this is amazing. How do you intend to use your new scanner? And they're like, no idea yet, but let me show you what it can do.
And guess what? I got it on sale. Like that's what
you
you're
know,
right?
December 31st,
I got a deal
right?
you've never heard of before.
Yeah. Oh, yes, always. And so, over the years, I've just seen the doctors, get those great new pieces of equipment and then they sit in a closet and gather dust. Well, the same is happening now with AI where there's this buzz around it. And just last week, I coached with a practice that was implementing AI in their phones. They'd done this prior to me coming on board. And I said, tell me a little bit about how that's going. And the one person at the front desk goes, well, it's basically like AI is the voicemail. It just gathers the information, then I'm still having to log in and check the voicemail. And I said, okay, and then what is happening with that information in the patient discussion? And she said, well, we're still mostly paper charts. So it's not going into any digital space. And so what I've said over and over again is, the AI era is here and everybody's excited about it. And you're using ChatGPT at home. And I think the first step for a doctor in using AI shouldn't be implementing anything in the clinic other than to go to ChatGPT itself and say, give me an analysis of my practice off of Google and what are people saying about me that I need to fix and improve.
Right.
And start there. And that will guide you to the AI that follows. And so interestingly enough, I've done it with several clinics and just said, do an analysis of yourself. Where are the key points of improvement if it were to search and comb all of the internet right now? What do people say about you and your practice? And ironically, what comes back first and foremost is insurance verification, which is an incredible piece of AI to turn on. But where it becomes difficult for the operational leader is Susie, who's been there for the last 15 years, diligently putting in those numbers and fax backs and callbacks and all the things. She has to be able to understand that her job is going to shift.
Yeah.
And I just did this with a clinic where it was actually a series of clinics, but the first one that I worked with to help her understand your job is now going to be more of a liaison between the insurance carrier and the patient so that they don't hate you anymore. And she's like, tell me more about that. And I said, okay, so what that means is AI is going to verify in real time the insurance. You get to have the custom call with the patient to tell them more. And you also get to have the exciting call that you call them back and say, let me tell you about what insurance covered for your visit, what your remaining out of pocket is, and why. Nobody's doing that. In fact, I just the other day got a bill for my daughter that was an extra charge that I didn't know about. And I'm like, wait, I paid the copay, but now I'm paying more. So wait, where did this money come from? We have a missing, link, a missing opportunity to take those that are highly skilled and knowledgeable inside of insurance and say, let's partner you with AI so that you can have a more high touch effect in the patient understanding their benefits. And right out of the gate, I had the doctor say, well, that's between the person and their insurance. I said, who did the patient, okay, yes, it's between the patient and their insurance. Who did the patient hand their insurance card to?
Yeah, exactly.
To you. So who do they think is responsible for the outcome of that bill? You. So if we can change that and implement AI to allow us to be more hospitable in the explanation, boy, what an incredible experience for our patients to have. And so that's the transformation, is to say, first let AI, give you the hard, cold, dirty facts about what the internet says about you. Just do it. It's brutal.
Yeah. As we were preparing for this episode, literally Bill and I were like, ooh, well, let's not talk about that here, but that could be a totally different podcast episode, like
Sure.
AI, tech, culture, building teams, all kinds of stuff. So Cassie, we appreciate you giving us your time. I know you're extremely, extremely busy. Just real quick, and why don't you tell the listeners kind of how they can reach out to you and learn about more of what you're doing at the Fractional Match?
Yeah, so you can go to thefractionalmatch.com and send a contact form there. You can also email me. It's just ctallon@thefractional.co. But honestly, the website is the best way to reach me. I operate mostly out of referrals, so mention that you found me through here because that's important to me, is that I'm working with people that are at the same caliber of what I hope to provide to them. So would love to share more. And you can also find out about my book on the website a little later this week. I actually have it in hand on Wednesday for the first time. So excited.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That is good stuff. We'll put everything there you just said in the show notes as well. But Cassie, appreciate you talking to two boring accountants. Wealth of information you've got in your head. So appreciate you taking the time.